I said before in our meeting with the new and very talented Prime Minister of Canada that we have some very big announcement to make. It's not about trade, it's about something else, but it's going to be a truly earth-shattering and positive development for this country and for the people of this country.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who was newly elected as the Prime Minister with a majority of seats in the Canadian Parliament, is visiting Washington.
I don't know, he's coming to see me. I'm not sure what he wants to see me about, but I guess he wants to make a deal. Everybody does.
As I speak, he's been holding sessions with Donald Trump about the so-called trade war and Trump's trolling of him about being a 51st state. Let me just address that first. Donald Trump did not like Prime Minister Trudeau, who did not like Donald Trump. And he was so frustrated by the surpluses that Canada kept racking up and their unwillingness to spend the required NATO 2% of GDP investment in munitions that he would troll Canada and say, we're the same language, the same people. We could do a lot better job than this guy.
When Trudeau told President-elect Trump that new tariffs would kill the Canadian economy, Trump joked to him that if Canada can't survive without ripping off the U.S. to the tune of $100 billion a year, then maybe Canada should become the 51st state and Trudeau could become its governor.
Trudeau was a failure. Pouliev, the Conservative candidate, had a 20-point lead. He lost it partly because Carney was the champion of Canadian nationalism and said, we're never going to make a 51st state. Donald Trump has no business doing. It's kind of like what Trump did with Panama and Greenland. It's a way of art of the deal. We got China to we kind of made it a little bit more irrelevant in Panama. We've got some reforms going on. Same with Greenland. We were never going to invade either one. We're never going to make Canada a 51st state. You need a majority vote of the Congress. The Congress is never going to vote to admit Canada because the left would feel it was an infringement upon their sovereignty. We were imperialists, colonialists. The right said, why do we want another New York or Colorado to screw up the country? So it's not going to happen. Carney knew that, but he ran on it, and he whipped up nationalism.
Donald Trump is trying to fundamentally change the world economy, the trading system. But really what he's trying to do to Canada, he's trying to break us so the U.S. can own us. They want our land, they want our resources, they want our water, they want our country.
What happens when a leader wins power not with vision, but with fear? Prime Minister Carney didn't just defeat his rival, he defeated Trump, or so he claimed. He warned of invasion, of annexation, of Canada becoming America's 51st state. But now that the campaign is over and the cameras are gone, who does he have to negotiate with? That's right, the very man he demonized.
Trump knows what he did, so Trump is reminding him about the 51st state.
So ask yourself, what's the cost of winning an election by burning the bridge you'll later need to cross?
But there's two issues, and they don't look good for Canada. Number one is, in 2014, all the NATO countries promised to spend 2% of GDP. And under Trump's prodding during the first term, and then the Ukraine war during Biden's term, it has frightened most of them. And there's only 8 of the 32 nations that have not met their 2% obligation. Canada's one of them, but it's one of the least cooperative of the 32 nations. In other words, it only spends 1.37% of its GDP on defense.
Canada should become the 51st state. No. Well, I still believe that, but it takes 2 to tango, right? But there are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
And nobody is going to proverbially mess with Canada when the United States has it under its nuclear shield, Alaska, early warnings, you name it. So they know that, and they do not want to spend the money. The other thing is they're running up a $63 billion with their trade surplus with their partner. And most of it is because they have a thick sulfurous crude oil that's in the middle of the country. And it's very convenient for them to go right across the border and sell it to us, and we like it, and we can refine it. We have the refineries that can deal with that type of difficult crude. It'd be very difficult for them to send it all the way to their east or west ports and make the same profit. 95% of their oil comes to us. We're a good customer, in other words. Why would they not then say, we'll try to import more poultry, cheese, agricultural products? We can't get down to zero, but we can cut the trade surplus by 20 or 30 billion. You're our neighbor, but they didn't do that.
I think, first of all, unfortunately, these countries have been ripping off our country for far too long. You have nearly a 300% tariff from Canada on American butter and American cheese. This makes it virtually impossible for American products to be imported into these markets.
It was very successful to whip up Canadian nationalism, very successful to win that election. But then where do you go from that? You go and see Donald Trump and you want to just say, we're not going to be a 51 state. We're not going to be a 51 state. Does he really believe that the majority of people in Congress are going to vote to admit Canada? Nobody wants to do that.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperations, is over.
Thank you for your hospitality and above all for your leadership. You're a transformational president, focus on the economy with a relentless focus on the American worker.
Pierre Poilievre's plan will leave us divided and ready to be conquered. Because a person who worships at the altar of Donald Trump will kneel before him, not stand up to him.
Securing your borders and securing the world.
Could have said this. Donald Trump is trolling us. We're friends with the United States. He's trying to needle us so that we spend more money on NATO and we lower our surplus, which is growing very big. And we're going to do that. We're going to negotiate. Don't take him serious. He's just doing this like he did to Panama. We're good friends. He kids us, we kid him. But he didn't do that. He tried to whip it up and it was successful. But once you whip it up and you get that hostility, then you've got to go deal with him. And then you've got to tell him, I'm not going to spend $40 billion on our defense. We're going to subsidize you on defense. And we're not going to lower that. So that's not going to work. It's not going to work. And so I think that he can say, he'll leave the meeting and say, I told him we're not going to be a 51st. That was an irrelevant misadventure. It was going nowhere, and he knew it. But the two issues that he knew were important, that they should man up and pay their 2% and help defend not only NATO, but the North American continent, which they had done brilliantly in the past, he didn't want to talk about. Or he could have said, we don't run up big surpluses with our friends. We're not Mexico. We're much closer to you. And we're going to work on this, and we're going to try to import. We'll work it down. No, he created his nationalist paradigm. It got him elected, and now he owns it. And it's not going to work with Donald Trump. I wish it would, but it's not. Because if you want to alienate the United States and you want to take seriously the art of the deal trolling and sort of laugh it off, or better yet, the Panamanians knew what they were doing. They were getting too close to China. They were surrendering partial sovereignty, and they backed off. And it's going to be a beautiful relationship with us. But Canada just couldn't do that. And I think they will eventually.
You can demonize a neighbor, or you can partner with one, but you cannot do both. Carney ran as a nationalist, but governs like a globalist. He promised independence, but now pleads for concessions. So here's the real question for Canadians, and for all of us. Are we electing leaders who speak the truth, or sell us fear? And when that fear fades, who pays the price?